She buried him, she mourned him. She sold her wedding ring just to feed their child. Then months later she spotted it glittering on a stranger's hand. But it wasn't just the ring. The man beside her, holding her waist, had her husband's smile, her husband's eyes, her husband's voice. He wasn't dead. He was starting over. And she was about to burn his new life to the ground. Survival demands sacrifice, but no one tells you it might be your soul. The kitchen smelled faintly of mildew and boiled potatoes. Anna sat hunched over the cracked formica table, the overhead bulb flickering like a tired pulse. She tipped the coin jar onto the table nickels, dimes, one crumpled $5 bill, and a Canadian penny that felt like a cruel joke. She counted once. Then again. Her fingers as she stacked the coins into crook towers, her breath fogging the glass where rain wept down the window in the next room. Her daughter's soft rhythmic breathing anchored her to the floor. The girl had fallen asleep clutching the frayed ear of a stuffed rabbit, its cotton tail long since pulled away in some nameless crisis of childhood. Anna closed her eyes. She could still hear his voice in this house, cherry blossoms raining down like confetti. A spring that felt stolen from someone else's life. His hands warm around hers as he slipped the silver band onto her finger, his whisper pressing against her ear. "I'll never leave you." But he had. The faucet dripped in slow metronome. She stared at her left hand. Pale skin marked where the ring had clung stubbornly even when her knuckles swelled during pregnancy. The thought came like a blade. If she sold it, the money might carry them through to Friday. Bread, milk, maybe a little chicken if she stretched it. But it was all she had left of him. Not the man he was gone long before his body followed. The ring held the echo of who she thought he was. She twisted it, back and forth. Back and forth. The wind rattled the window in her chest. Something broke loose. Hunger gnawed louder than memory. She slid the ring off and laid it on the table. It looked smaller than she remembered, cold against the scarred wood. Her coat was still damp from yesterday's walk, but she tugged it on anyway. No umbrella. She didn't want her hands full. She didn't want to give herself any excuse to turn back. She paused at the bedroom door, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall under the thin blanket. Anna pressed her knuckles to her lips. When she whispered goodnight, it felt like a confession. The door clicked shut. The street outside was a black river. Rain needled her face as she stepped off the curb, boots finding puddles in the fractured asphalt. Streetlights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. She gripped the ring so tight her fingers ached. The pawn shop was 5 blocks away, its window always filled with guitars and chipped china that no one ever seemed to buy. Each block stretched longer than the last. The smell of wet concrete filled her nose, sharp and metallic like blood. A memory slid in, unbidden. Their first apartment, boxes stacked to the ceiling. He had kissed her forehead and told her, "We'll make it, you'll see." She had believed him then. She almost stumbled on a loose paving stone. A car passed too fast, spraying her with cold water. She flinched but didn't curse. There was no point. The world wasn't listening. The pawnshop bell jingled as she stepped inside. The air reeked of old wood and forgotten things. A man sat behind the counter, pale under yellow light, his eyes fixed on a small television playing a muted crime show. His name tag read Marty. He looked up, startled, as if no one ever came here this late. "Help you?" Anna placed the ring on the counter. Her hand lingered a fraction too long, as if her fingers didn't trust her heart. Marty squinted at it, picked it up with thick fingers, turning it under the light. The metal gleamed, a tiny universe trapped in its curve. "Wedding band?" "Yes," her voice felt foreign. "Not much market for plain silver. Sentimental value, though. You sure?" She nodded. Marty scratched his chin. There was a softness in his eyes she didn't expect, some shadow of recognition. He didn't ask why she was here. Maybe he already knew. People only came for 2 reasons: desperation, or revenge? 30, he said finally. Anna's stomach knotted. She had hoped for more, but even hope felt like a luxury these days. She nodded again. Marty placed 3 crisp 10s on the counter. She took them, shoving them deep into her pocket, but she didn't move. Not yet. The ring still lay between them, light catching on its edge. He tilted his head. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Her throat burned. Marty gave a small nod. A man who'd seen enough to know when not to push. The bell jingled again as she stepped back into the storm. The night felt colder now, her coat clinging to her skin. Her hand went to her pocket, gripping. The bills. They felt heavier than the ring ever had. She didn't cry. Not here. Not where anyone could see. By the time she reached her street, the rain had softened to a mist. The windows of the house glowed faintly. She stood outside for a moment, watching Dot in the quiet. She heard his voice again. I'll never leave you. Wanted to scream. Instead, she opened the door. Her daughter stirred in the bedroom, murmuring in her sleep. Anna leaned against the doorframe, listening. The sound was almost enough to make her believe she could survive this. She went back. To the kitchen. The cracked table waited like a patient ghost. She pulled out the money, laying it flat. $30. Enough to buy groceries. Enough to keep going. She didn't look at her hand. She didn't want to see the pale circle where the ring had been. Somewhere across town, in a dim-lit pawn shop, the ring sat under Marty's careful gaze. He didn't lock it away yet, didn't price it. He just stared at it for a long time, his thumb running absently over his own bare ring finger. She doesn't know this yet, but the ring isn't gone. It's waiting to ruin her all over again. And when it does, no amount of rain will wash it clean. Some ghosts don't haunt, they rebuild. The café smelled of sugared milk and roasted beans, the kind of sweetness that made Anna's stomach churn instead of settle. She stood outside the window for a moment too long, rain misting her hair, before pushing the door open. A bell chimed above her, sharp enough to feel like mockery. She told herself this wasn't indulgence. She was here for a job posting she'd seen taped to the counter last week. Dishwasher, minimum wage, no benefits. But even lies lose their weight when repeated too often. The air was warm, almost too warm, and she tugged at the zipper of her thrifted coat. The girl behind the counter smiled in that practiced way Anna could never master. Morning. Table for one? Anna nodded. Her voice felt locked behind her teeth. She sat near the back, away from the windows, the table sticky beneath her fingers. She ordered nothing, not yet. The place hummed with quiet conversation, spoons clinking against porcelain. Her eyes drifted. A couple sat near the corner. The woman's laugh carried like a bell-soft expensive. Anna didn't mean to stare. But it wasn't the woman's beauty that caught her. It was the hand that brushed her coffee cup, the ring. Silver. Thin band, a tiny scratch across its side like a shallow wound. Anna knew every curve, every flaw. Her breath hitched, caught. Between her ribs, the woman's fingers drummed on the table as she spoke. Anna couldn't hear her words, but the soundless rhythm clawed at something primal, an echo of nights she'd lain awake, his hand tapping the headboard as he thought of nothing and everything. She swallowed, hard, but the ring wasn't the only thing that didn't belong. The man leaned forward, brushing crumbs from the woman's sleeve. His profile caught the light. It wasn't possible. And yet, the same slope of nose. The same crooked smile that used to surface when he was trying not to laugh. Even the habit of resting his hand against the small of a woman's back like she was glass that might shatter. Anna's blood turned electric. She had seen the death certificate. She had scattered his ashes, except they'd come in a sealed box, weighty and impersonal. She had never looked. Never dared. Now she wondered. She gripped the edge of the table until her nails hurt. The cafe's hum receded. replaced by the memory of rain on their old apartment roof. He had held her back then, whispering about futures and children and tiny houses with lemon trees. She had believed him even when she shouldn't have. Her stomach twisted. The woman laughed again, tipping her head so a strand of hair slipped loose from its perfect chignon. The man brushed it back tenderly. Anna's throat burned. The waitress approached. "Can I get you anything?" Anna shook her head, words still locked tight. "You sure?" "Yes," it came out hoarse. The girl hesitated, then retreated. Anna's eyes found the ring again. She had pawned it in desperation, telling herself she'd get it back someday. She never imagined it resurfacing here on a stranger's elegant hand, or that he would be alive to place it there. And if he wasn't dead, what had she buried? Anna forced herself to stand. Her knees trembled. She stepped closer, close enough to see the engraving inside the band as the woman reached for her cup. Forever. ANJANN's vision swam. She wanted to scream, to tear the ring from that delicate finger, to demand answers from the man who had left her drowning in his absence. But she did none of those things. She turned toward the door, her breath ragged. Her reflection in the glass met her with hollow eyes. She didn't recognize herself anymore. As she reached for the handle, his laugh drifted over her shoulder. A low, familiar sound. The sound that used to pull her back from nightmares. She froze, turning her head just enough to see him press his palm against the woman's back, his thumb stroking a slow, thoughtless circle. The same gesture he'd used on her once, in a kitchen. Much like this, on a night when everything still felt whole. Anna's world split in two. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. It's not death that hurts, it's replacement. The funeral had smelled of lily and damp wool. Anna couldn't remember who had held her up when her knees buckled as they lowered the box into the ground. She remembered only the thud of soil, and the way the sun kept shining like nothing had ended. Now, standing across the street in a coat that no longer kept out the cold, she watched him hold another woman's hand. Elise. She had learned the name last night, scrolling Elise's curated life on her phone screen until her eyes burned. Anna's thumb hovered over the glowing images. Elise laughing on a yacht. Elise toasting crystal flutes of champagne. Elise wearing Anna's ring, as if it had always belonged to her. Anna lowered her phone. Across the street, behind the boutique. Café glass. They were laughing over something trivial, some joke Anna would never be let in on. She wanted to turn away, but her feet stayed rooted to the wet pavement. The scarred screen of her old phone buzzed in her other pocket, a ghost she couldn't shake. She had pulled it from the drawer last night, desperate, and found a single voicemail listed as deleted, but recoverable. She hadn't played it yet, but even in silence, the message was alive. Waiting like a trap, Anna's eyes followed the couple as they exited the cafe. Elise wore a cream coat that never seemed to catch rain. Her heels clicked on the stone walkway. Anna remembered her own wedding heels, scuffed secondhand, still in a box somewhere with his old ties. He walked beside Elise with easy confidence, his hand resting at the small of her back. The same gesture he'd once saved for Anna. Her stomach knotted. A flashback seized her without mercy. Him sprawled on their couch, speaking low into his phone when he thought she was asleep, his thumb rubbing a slow, thoughtful circle against his thigh. When she asked who it was, he said, "Work. Always work." Anna closed her eyes. Rain spattered her cheeks. Or maybe it wasn't rain, but the voicemail wasn't work. It was warning. Her thumb hovered over play. She pressed it. The sound of static. Then a voice. A woman's voice, soft but clipped, like glass breaking underwater. "You need to finish it," she's starting to suspect. Anna's breath caught Elise at the sound of a door closing in the background. A man's muffled voice, his voice saying something too low to catch Elise again. "If you can't, I will." Anna nearly dropped the phone. Across the street, the couple stopped at a florist's window. Elise pointed at something, and he laughed, touching her cheek in that absent way Anna used to crave. The phone as in Anna's hand. She wanted to call out, to march across the street and claw the truth from them both. But her feet didn't move. The memory of soil hitting the coffin returned, heavy and wet. She had mourned him. She had buried him. And all the while he had been here rebuilding a life with a woman who sounded like threat and honey at once. Anna's coat clung to her like a second skin. Her palms itched. She thought of the USB drive tucked into her sock drawer, a remnant of their shared passwords, his financial records. She had never opened it after he died. Now she would. But first, she watched them. Watched as Elise leaned her head on his shoulder and he kissed her hair, his hand tightening on the bouquet she had chosen. Anna's fingers clenched around her phone until the plastic casing creaked. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. The voice on the tape wasn't his. It was hers. Elise's, the first time Anna lied to her son. He was 4 and the goldfish had died in the night. She flushed it with trembling fingers, knelt to his eye level, and said it went to visit its family in the sea. He had blinked up at her with that terrible, unquestioning trust children are born with. Now 4 years later, she'd kill to get that kind of belief back. It was raining soft, like someone whispering against the windows. A Tuesday. Tuesdays were always quiet, unnervingly so, like the world was holding its breath just before something went wrong. Anna sat on the carpet, knees pulled in, pretending to match socks. But really, she was staring at the edge of the couch where her son's backpack lay open, half-zipped. A paper stuck out, curling at the corners like it had been loved too hard. She hadn't meant to look, but the crayon colors were too loud in the silence. And when she pulled the paper out, her breath snagged. 3 stick figures. A boy in the middle, holding hands with 2 tall ones, one labeled Daddy, the other blank. Not Mommy, just blank. She stared so long the lines blurred. Then came the quiet sound that undid her. Footsteps. Her son stood in the doorway. Damp from the rain, blue hoodie darkened at the sleeves. His face was open, unreadable in the way children often are, like glass right before it shatters. "Why was Daddy at the park?" he asked, voice small. Not accusing, just wondering. Anna's throat closed. A pause too long bloomed between them, and in it, the lie tried to take shape. "He wasn't," she said. "You must have imagined. I saw him," he said softer. He waved. And just like that, the world bent. She wanted to say it was impossible. That his father was miles away, a name on court papers, a locked drawer of memories she refused to reopen. But her son wasn't blinking. And children don't lie like adults do. They lie badly with hope. Not strategy. A flicker of panic lit in her chest. Had he come back? Had he found them? Or worse, had he never left? But did he talk to you? She managed, careful, threading calm through her voice like it was embroidery and not a defense mechanism. Her son looked down at his shoes. One was untied. Mud crusted the edge of the sole. "No," he said, just smiled. "Like he missed me." Anna folded the drawing, not carefully. Not with the kind of tenderness a mother should. She tucked it back in the backpack like it might vanish there. Like it belonged to someone else's day. Narrator aside, but the drawing wasn't the only thing in that bag. She went to the sink, ran water, let it overflow just slightly, the hiss a veil she could hide behind. Behind her he lingered. Did he used to smile like that? He asked. And that's when she knew. The boy had been watching old videos. The ones she thought she'd buried in a hard drive deep in the closet, behind tax folders and guilt. She turned off the tap. Stared at the dish towel like it could rescue her. "He used to," she said, then added, quieter, but not at the end. Outside, a car passed with a splash. Somewhere in the neighbor's yard, wind chimes clinked once and fell still. Her son wandered toward the table, sat, and started unpacking his lunchbox. A quiet routine, a child's return to safety. But Anna's skin itched. How long had he known? She remembered once, Long ago, her son coloring a picture with his father. They had drawn a dragon, each taking turns with the markers. She'd watched from the doorway, arms crossed. The man had looked up then, caught her watching, and winked. It had felt innocent at the time. It wasn't. She walked over now, sat across from the boy. I need you to tell me exactly what happened, she said. And he did. The park. The swings. The man in the brown coat near the path. Waved once, smiled, disappeared behind the trees. Her heart sank at the details. Brown coat, same as always, he never threw things away. Even people. She reached into the backpack again, pretending to check for homework. Found a second page. This one wasn't a drawing. It was a photo. A printed screenshot, grainy, zoomed in. A man under a tree, facing sideways, just enough to spark memory. And beside him, a child. Not her son. A girl, younger, curly hair like Anna's, dimples like his. She felt the tremor before she realized it was her own hand shaking. Narrator aside, children aren't supposed to keep secrets from their mothers. Unless someone teaches them how. She stood too fast. The chair scraped loud. Her son flinched. Where did you get this? She asked. He hesitated, then eyes lowered, whispered, he gave it to me. Her vision swam. When? Yesterday. Silence gaped between them, thick and rising. And you didn't tell me? He looked up then, defiant in that terrifying child way sadness worn like armor. I thought you'd be mad. Anna turned away. Her hands found the countertop, gripped. Mad? She was oceans beyond mad. She was shipwrecked in fear. She was fury and failure braided tight in her chest, but she couldn't show it. Not now. What did he say? She asked again. He said ... The boy paused. He said to give it to you. That you'd understand. Understand what? That he had another child? That the reason he disappeared wasn't escape but replacement. Emotional reversal. Her certainty, her proud survival, twisted to doubt. Had she escaped or been discarded? She thought of the last fight. His words. You'll never keep him from me. Her lawyer said he wouldn't try again. That visitation was closed. That men like him gave up after the paperwork dried. But she remembered his mother's necklace, tiny garnet, cross-shattered against the kitchen tile after she ripped it from his neck during that final argument. She had kept the broken pieces in a glass jar. Not out of sentiment, but to remind herself what cracked first. Her son was watching her now. Not afraid, just ... alert, like he knew something she didn't. Do you miss him? He asked. She wanted to say no. Wanted to say, I miss the idea of him, not the man himself. But that's too much for a child. So she said nothing. Instead, she picked up the photo again. Stared at the girl. The eyes were his, but the smile? It was hers. A flicker of something pity almost moved in her. Because if this girl was real, if this was his daughter too, then maybe he was trying to start over. Maybe he was haunted too. Antagonist depth. Maybe he waved from the trees. Because he was afraid. Because he knew what he'd done, and knew he couldn't undo it. She knelt beside her son, brushing hair from his brow. Next time you see him, she said gently, you come straight to me. You understand? He nodded. Then, after a beat, will you talk to him? She didn't answer, because forgiveness is a language she's forgotten how to speak. She stood, walked to the hallway, and pulled the glass jar from the top shelf. The one with the broken necklace. She unscrewed the lid, poured the jagged pieces into her palm. They looked like tiny drops of dried blood. And in the dim light of the kitchen, the cross still glinted like it remembered being whole. The funeral smelled like carnations and boiled coffee. Anna had worn black, not because she believed he was really gone, but because it was easier then. Arguing with tradition. Her mother-in-law, Lorraine, had cried just enough to be appropriate. then straightened the pearl buttons on her blouse and reminded Anna the viewing was closed casket. For dignity. She'd whispered like that could soften the way death warps a man. But Anna remembered. The casket never felt heavy enough. A week later, that weightless box still pressed on her chest like a lie you say too many times. You start to taste it. She sat now in her parked car outside the funeral home, engine ticking. Rain fell in slow, hesitant drops like it wasn't sure it was supposed to be morning. Her fingers clutched the steering wheel, wedding band still circling her finger like a ghost that didn't know it wasn't welcome anymore. Inside, the receptionist was young, bored, too cheerful. The kind who calls everyone hun and pretends not to notice the edge in grief. "I just need to confirm something," Anna said, voice low. "My husband, Daniel Wallace, funeral was last week. I need a copy of the death certificate." The girl blinked. Clicked keys. Chewed gum. Chewed silence. Weird. Nothing's filed here yet. Anna's jaw tightened. Maybe it went straight to the city records? The girl shrugged. Could be, but usually we file it. It's kind of our thing. Anna smiled politely. Walked out before the scream in her throat could shape into sound. Back in the car, she sat still. Her hands trembled in her lap. She hadn't cried in days. Not because she was strong, but because something inside her refused to grieve a man who might still be breathing. What if the casket was empty? The thought had come before, in sleep-deep hours when memory curled in on itself. But now it snapped. Awake. Narrator aside. But grief is clever. It borrows faces to keep itself fed. She drove home with her hazards blinking, even though it wasn't raining hard. The house looked different now, too sharp at the corners, like a place that didn't recognize its owner. The porch light flickered. Again. She hadn't changed the bulb because Daniel used to do that. She stepped inside. Kicked off her shoes, one sticking half in the mud. The mail waited on the kitchen counter, already sifted by her hands earlier, except one envelope. It hadn't been there this morning. No stamp. No return address. Just her name, written in pen. She opened it slowly. Like she already knew. Photographs, 5, matte prints. She spread them like cards. Daniel, with another woman. In a winter coat she'd never seen, holding hands outside a courthouse, smiling at a toddler. One photo had a date in the corner, 2 years before his death. The world inside her collapsed quietly, like rotten floorboards under careful feet. The note was folded at the bottom. 5 words, printed neat. "Did you really think you were his first wife?" Her breath turned to knives, narrator aside. Some truths don't stab. They decay. She walked to the sink. Rinsed her hands though they were clean. One of the photos had left a smudge on her fingertip, and she couldn't tell if it was ink or the past trying to stain her again. From the drawer, she pulled the scarlet envelope Daniel had once hidden between books, for the baby's documents, he'd claimed. She never checked. She had trusted him. Inside it now, nothing but old receipts, mostly restaurant tips he never left. But tucked at the very back, a slip of paper she didn't recognize. A plane ticket. Toronto, dated 8 months ago. Round trip. In his name. She sat down. Slow. Memory flickered. That week, he'd said it was a work trip. But she remembered the call from the hotel when he'd missed his checkout. She had assumed then affair maybe. Alcohol maybe. But death? It had been too convenient. At the funeral, Lorraine had kept touching the pearls at her neck, whispering, "He's at peace now." Anna remembered the way Lorraine avoided her eyes. The way she touched the coffin, not like it held her son but like it was a prop. Antagonist depth. Maybe Lorraine knew. Maybe she helped him vanish. But Anna also remembered the way Lorraine sobbed once alone in the guest bathroom, gripping Daniel's old baseball cap like it had breath. People lie for all kinds of love. She rose, walked to the bedroom, pulled out the photo box. The one marked first year. Inside Daniel's old letters, baby clothes, A hospital bracelet dot, and at the very bottom, the pendant dot gold, bent slightly at the clasp. A tiny compass, once his grandfather's. Daniel had worn it the day they married. He called it his true north. She held it now, thumb brushing the metal symbolic object. It didn't point anywhere. It never had. She pressed it to her palm. Tightly, she looked again at the photo of the child, dark curls. Eyes too old for that face. The woman, Elise, was smiling at Daniel like Anna never had. Not even in the early days. Because love born in fear doesn't glow, it flickers. She walked to her son's room. Stood in the doorway. He was asleep, curled like a question mark. She remembered telling him his father had died doing the right thing. She didn't know what that meant at the time. She just needed the story to have a moral, but now the story had rot under its ribs. She went back to the kitchen, pulled a drawer, took out a USB drive, the one Daniel used to use for work, plugged it into her laptop, watched it blink once. Then open, inside, one folder. Password protected. She typed in the birth date of their son. It. Open. Documents. Photos. Legal forms in someone else's name. Silent setup. He had planned the disappearance. Years ago. Maybe even before the baby. The compass still rested in her palm. Her fingers closed around it like a decision, emotional reversal. What she once wore as pride, wife, mother, survivor now felt like someone else's costume. A role she never auditioned for. She printed one of the photos. The one with Elise and the child. Taped it to the fridge, wrote underneath, "She deserves answers too." Because revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's just light in a locked room. And in the dark kitchen, the compass spun wild, lost then stilled, pointing nowhere at all. Just her name, written in pen. She opened it slowly, like she already knew. Photographs, 5 matte prints. She spread them like cards. Daniel, with another woman. In a winter coat she'd never seen, holding hands outside a courthouse, smiling at a toddler. One photo had a date in the corner, 2 years before his death. The world inside her collapsed quietly, like rotten floorboards under careful feet. The note was folded at the bottom. 5 words, printed neat. "Did you really think you were his first wife?" Her breath turned to knives, narrator aside. Some truths don't stab. They decay. She walked to the sink, rinsed her hands though they were clean. One of the photos had left a smudge on her fingertip, and she couldn't tell if it was ink or the past trying to stain her again. From the drawer, she pulled the scarlet envelope Daniel had once hidden between books for the baby's documents, he'd claimed. She never checked. She had trusted him. Inside it now, nothing but old receipts, mostly restaurant tips he never left. But tucked at the very back, a slip of paper she didn't recognize. A plane ticket, Toronto, dated 8 months ago, round trip. In his name. She sat down, slow. Memory flickered. That week, he'd said it was a work trip. But she remembered the call from the hotel when he'd missed his checkout. She had assumed then affair maybe, alcohol maybe. But death? It had been too convenient. At the funeral, Lorraine had kept touching the pearls at her neck, whispering, "He's at peace now." Anna remembered the way Lorraine avoided her eyes. The way she touched the coffin, not like it held her son but like it was a prop, antagonist depth. Maybe Lorraine knew. Maybe she helped him vanish. But Anna also remembered the way Lorraine sobbed once alone in the guest bathroom, gripping Daniel's old baseball cap like it had breath. People lie for all kinds of love. She rose, walked to the bedroom, pulled out the photo box. The one marked first year. Inside, Daniel's old letters, baby clothes, a hospital bracelet. And at the very bottom, the pendant. Gold, bent slightly at the clasp. A tiny compass, once his grandfather's. Daniel had worn it the day they married. He called it his true north. She held it now, thumb brushing the metal, symbolic object. It didn't point anywhere. It never had. She pressed it to her palm. Tightly, she looked again at the photo of the child, dark curls. Eyes too old for that face. The woman, Elise, was smiling at Daniel like Anna never had. Not even in the early days. Because love born in fear doesn't glow, it flickers. She walked to her son's room. Stood in the doorway. He was asleep, curled like a question mark. She remembered telling him his father had died doing the right thing. She didn't know what that meant at the time. She just needed the story to have a moral, but now the story had rot under its ribs. She went back to the kitchen, pulled a drawer, took out a USB drive, the one Daniel used to use for work, plugged it into her laptop, watched it blink once, then open. Inside, one folder. Password protected. She typed in the birth date of their son. It opened. Documents, photos, legal forms in someone else's name. Silent setup. He had planned the disappearance years ago. Maybe even before the baby. The compass still rested in her palm. Her fingers closed around it like a decision, emotional reversal. What she once wore as pride, wife, mother, survivor, now felt like someone else's costume. A role she never auditioned for. She printed one of the photos, the one with Elise and the child, taped it to the fridge, wrote underneath, "She deserves answers too." Because revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's just light in a locked room. And in the dark kitchen, the compass spun wild. Lost then stilled, pointing nowhere at all. She remembered the first time Lorraine touched her, on the wedding day. Soft hands adjusting the lace on Anna's veil, smiling like she meant it. "He chose well," she'd said. "You'll give him a strong name." Anna had laughed, not knowing what was being measured. Now, 10 years later, Anna stood in that same house, Loren's kitchen, a place where silence hung heavier than the curtains. The wallpaper was yellowing around the corners. The family photos were still arranged in obsessive symmetry on the wall. Daniel's face framed in every stage of curated perfection. Little league, prom, law school, wedding. She didn't knock. Just walked in. Lorraine turned slowly from the sink, hands still damp. She didn't ask why Anna was there. Didn't ask if she wanted tea. Just looked at her like grief wasn't something they could pretend to share anymore. "Where is he?" Anna said, voice steady as a blade. Loren's eyes flickered. She wiped her hands on a dish towel that once belonged to Anna, the embroidered one, fraying at the edge. "A quiet theft." "I don't know," Lorraine said. The lie was quick, too quick. Anna had once mistaken that speed for maternal instinct. Now she knew it was habit. She stepped closer, pulled a photo from her coat pocket. The one from the envelope, Daniel and Elise on a porch swing. Sunlight on their faces like guilt had never touched them. "I want the truth." Lorraine sat down. Her fingers trembled slightly as they folded the towel, again and again, into smaller and smaller shapes. "Anna, you have to understand," she began. "We didn't think you'd come back after the funeral. You looked so gone, as if grief had been a choice, as if it justified burying her alive." Anna said nothing, narrator aside. But silence, wielded right, makes confessions pour faster than threats ever could. Lorraine looked toward the hallway. Her eyes, rimmed and tired, blue, flicked toward the door. "He called once, a month before the funeral. Said he needed out. Said you'd." Anna laughed, sharp, ugly. "Said I what, Lorraine?" "Burned the toast, raised his child, paid the mortgage while he traveled for work." The old woman flinched. Not at the volume, Anna hadn't raised her voice, but at the venom. It was new. She was used to Anna's quiet. "Not this." Lorraine reached for the sugar bowl, like her hands needed purpose. "He wasn't happy," she said. "He felt trapped. He always wanted a legacy. He wanted a son," Anna finished. "He had a son." Loren's hands stopped moving, narrator aside. "But some women don't see children. They see futures that look like themselves. He said the child wasn't like him, Lorraine whispered. Too quiet, too soft. Anna's breath left her body like air from a punctured tire. The room was too bright. Too still. You helped him disappear, she said finally. You let me bury a casket filled with nothing. Lorraine looked up. Eyes wet now, not with guilt, but memory. You don't understand what it's like to watch your child fail. Daniel was slipping. Drinking, losing jobs. You would have exposed him. I should have. Anna's voice cracked, not from weakness but from all the years she'd been told to keep the family name clean. And Elise? She asked. Lorraine didn't speak. So Anna opened her purse, pulled out the sonogram photo. Daniel and Elise smiling. A smudge of a child between them, symbolic object. He left me for a heartbeat, Anna said, voice hollow. Not even a person. Just the idea of one. Lorraine stood suddenly, too fast. The chair legs scraped like protest. He wanted someone who wouldn't question him, she said. Someone who would let him lead. Anna stared. And then quietly, the reversal took hold. All the pride she'd once held, wife, mother, backbone, collapsed. Into the sickening realization that she'd been a placeholder. A chapter he tore out and pretended never existed. Why didn't you tell me? Anna asked. Why the lies? Lorraine looked smaller now, old in a way Anna hadn't noticed before. Her hand went to her neck, where the garnet necklace used to hang antagonist depth. I begged him to stay, she said. I told him the baby was his, that your boy had his eyes. But he said he saw more of himself in Elise, said she believed in him. And I didn't? You challenged him. Anna closed her eyes. She saw Daniel at their son's birth tents, distant. Saw him pack for Toronto. Saw him kiss her forehead like an afterthought. As she saw herself, trusting, hoping, forgiving, until hope became humiliation. He was my husband, she said. You let me grieve a man who was still breathing. Lorraine sat again, slowly this time. We didn't know he'd fake his death. That was his idea, said it'd be cleaner. Said you'd move on faster. And you believed him? I believed. What I needed to. Silence fell like ash between them. Anna stood, picked up the sugar bowl, poured its contents into the sink. Watched the granules dissolve in the slow swirl of water. Symbolism, simple and bitter. From her purse, she pulled the USB, placed it on the counter. He left files, she said. Financials. Plans, fake IDs. Lorraine blinked. You hacked him. I read the receipts. Silence set up. As she turned to leave. Her hand brushed the doorframe, where Daniel's height had once been marked in pencil as a child. Lines rising every year. The last one had been crossed out. She paused, took a breath. He didn't outgrow you, she said. He erased you, just like he did to me. Lorraine looked down at her folded hands. No rings, just skin and shame. And Elise? She asked, voice barely audible. She get the same version we did, Anna said. Until he needs another rewrite. She opened the door. Then turned back. You weren't protecting him. You were protecting the myth of him. And behind her, the sugar in the sink bled into the drain like memory, sweetened just enough to swallow. She still remembered the smell of his study cedarwood and printer ink, spiked faintly with cologne he stopped wearing 2 years before his death. When Anna crossed the threshold again, the scent hit like a trapdoor. Memory didn't knock, it slammed. She stood in the doorway longer than she meant to, breathing in the life he never actually left behind. The floors creaked in the same places. The chair still had the imprint of him. A navy sweater, his favorite, draped over the backrest, one sleeve twisted as if he'd just taken it off. She ran her fingers along the bookshelf, pausing on a photo in a silver frame. Daniel holding there. Son as a baby, both faces turned away from the camera. She flipped it down. Even in pictures, he was always leaving. The door hadn't been locked. She'd watched from the car until Elise and Daniel left in the black SUV, same one she thought he'd died in. Some lies wear their own skin too long, they forget what truth ever looked like. She slipped in with gloves. Not because of Prince, but because touching anything bare here felt like a betrayal to herself. The study was cleaner than she remembered. Sanitized, but not sterile. There were traces of him everywhere. Notes in his handwriting, his old wristwatch laid carefully in a ceramic dish. The one she gave him on their 5th anniversary. He said he'd never wear it, hated time on his wrist, but kept it anyway. Symbolic. Object. He'd let time pass in secret instead. Anna moved to the desk, tried the drawers. 2 opened. One didn't. A brass keyhole, polished like it had been touched often. The drawer was thin, maybe 3 inches high, a man's drawer. The kind meant for hiding, not storing. She stood up, scanned the room again. Behind the curtains. Inside the coat pocket. Under the globe that had always been turned to France, even though he'd never been. And then inside the hollow base of the lamp, her fingers touched cold metal. Key. She didn't pause. The drawer clicked open. Inside, a man's exit strategy. 2 passports. One with his name, one with a new one. A thick wad of cash. 3 credit cards. And a USB, black, unlabeled except for one word written in white marker. Plan B. Narrator aside. But Plan A had been their son. A life built on Sundays and second chances. There was also a single sheet of paper. She recognized it instantly. A will. Her name was scratched out. Elise's was not. She sat down, hands shaking. She plugged the USB into her laptop, the one she brought in a tote bag with no initials, no trace of herself. The screen blinked and then opened a folder. Inside files. Dozens. Insurance forms. Forged. Death certificates. Financial transfers. A spreadsheet labeled exit timeline. Photos of Anna's signature. Copied. Digitized. She hadn't just been erased. She'd been rehearsed. Narrator aside. People don't fake deaths. They bury witnesses. She clicked a video file. Daniel's face appeared, recorded off a phone, low resolution. He was in the study, same chair she now sat in. His voice was calm, practiced. "If you're watching this," he said, "then something's gone wrong." He didn't look scared. He looked tired. But his eyes carried something else. Not guilt. Not quite. Fear. Antagonist depth. Maybe he knew he'd gone too far. That someone would pull the wrong thread. Plan B exists because I couldn't trust her, he continued. Anna always asked too many questions. I needed a way out. Not just for me, but for my son. That word hit harder than all the others. As if she were incidental. A detour. He leaned forward in the video. She wouldn't have survived the truth. She made everything heavier. I needed oxygen. The screen flickered, and Anna, still and breathless, finally felt the full weight of it. She'd been a storm. He plotted escape from, emotional reversal. She had once been his safe place. Now she was his plan. B. She ejected the USB, slipped it into her boot. Moved to the window and opened it halfway. The cold came in like clarity. She left the drawer open. One drawer in a room of locked lives. She turned to leave. But something snagged. The wristwatch, still ticking. She picked it up. Flipped it over. Etched beneath the dial her own engraving, long forgotten. No time lost is wasted if it's real. She put it in her coat pocket, because no one else should wear time that wasn't theirs. Downstairs. The front door opened. Footsteps. Voices. Then silence. Anna froze. Her breath tightened into a shape she hadn't made since childhood. Small, invisible. She stepped back into the shadow of the study, against the far wall, behind the long beige curtain. A second passed. Then a third. Then came the voice. Low, familiar, not angry. Not loud. You weren't supposed to find this. And in the crack of the curtain's light, Anna saw the shadow of a man who'd already grieved her goodbye. The first time he lied. It was small. Something about a receipt, folded in quarters and slipped into his coat pocket. She found it days later while doing laundry. He said it was from lunch. But the total was too high for a sandwich, and the wine wasn't hers. That was 12 years ago. Now, Anna sat in the dark with her laptop open, screen glow brushing her face like a slow burn. The USB drive she pulled from the locked drawer, Plan B, hummed quietly in the port. She hadn't opened the last file yet. The one simply titled Confession.mp4. Her hand hovered over the TRACKPAD. Outside, wind clawed at the windows. Somewhere in the house, a pipe groaned like a warning. She pressed play. Daniel appeared on screen again. Same shirt, same chair. The same weary mouth that had once kissed her temple after the baby's fever broke. His voice was calm, but not cold. I never meant for it to go this far. He began. She paused it immediately, because wasn't that always the first line in every man's escape act? She stood, went to the kitchen. The torn receipt, the first lie, was still taped. Inside the junk drawer. She'd kept it, not out of sentiment, but as evidence. Not for a trial, for herself, symbolic object. Proof she'd seen the cracks before the collapse. She poured tea. Didn't drink it. Steam curled into nothing. At the laptop, she hit play again. Daniel shifted in his seat, rubbed the bridge of his nose. Anna wasn't supposed to find this. Hell, I didn't think she'd come looking. He looked off camera then, not in guilt, but in fear. I loved her once, I think. But I couldn't breathe inside the life we made. It felt ... assigned. Narrator. Aside, some betrayals don't roar. They whisper like oxygen leaving a room. He continued. Elise made things feel light. Like I could choose again. She never asked what I wasn't offering. There it was, not a confession. A coronation, he thought. Himself reborn. Anna stared at the screen until the video ended. Then she closed the laptop quietly. Calmness had never sat well on her face, but now it wore like armor. The war had already begun. Earlier that day, she had started with Elise's curated world Instagram, charity boards, that nauseating blog post titled Surviving Widowhood. My journey to joy. She sent anonymous envelopes to 3 of Elise's colleagues, each one with a photo of Daniel and Elise, dated before his death. Then to Elise's sister, the one who always posted group photos with suspiciously absent captions, and the lawyer. Anna hadn't been sure about involving him. But when she heard his voice on the phone, flat, detached, she realized how useful men like him were. They didn't care about right or wrong. Just signatures and firewalls. He forged the will, she said. I have proof, and I want it undone. The man cleared his throat. This is ... complicated. You're a lawyer, she said. Not a toddler. Complicated is your job. She sent the files. But she hadn't told him about the last recording. Not yet. At night, she worked by lamplight, her son asleep down the hall. She protected him now like a country borders itself quietly, relentlessly. No more fairy tales. No more bedtime stories where daddy was a hero. That role had been buried with the fake funeral. She sat by the window, watching the porch light flicker, the same one Daniel used to fix. Funny. She'd once found that flicker charming, a reminder he hadn't gotten to it yet. Now it felt like a warning strobe, ticking towards some unseen explosion. Narrator aside, even light lies when it flickers long enough. She opened the USB again, scrolled past financials, travel logs, offshore accounts. She found a folder labeled Alternate Identity Materials. Inside, PDFs, templates, a digital birth certificate for a man named Mark Hensley. She printed it, then set it on fire in the kitchen sink. One flame. One file, one false life. Gone. She recorded her own message the next morning. Her voice sounded unfamiliar in playback steady, stripped of hope. My name is Anna Wallace. If this goes public, it's because someone tried to silence me. My husband faked his death, rewrote his will, and built a second life while leaving our child with ashes. She paused. He wasn't reborn, he just fled. She emailed it to 3 secure accounts under a fake name. Burned the flash drive. Scattered. The plastic remains in a trash bin 5 blocks away. Elise cracked first. An Instagram post vanished. Then the comment section locked. Then a statement appeared on her foundation's site. Due to personal matters, we are stepping away from public work temporarily. Temporary never means short. And Daniel? She hadn't seen him. But she knew he'd feel it. The unraveling of a perfect lie begins with a loose thread. Anna had pulled hard. She wrote a letter to Lorraine, too. Not for reconciliation. For record, I know what you helped him do. I understand now. Mothers can be cruelest when they think they're protecting something sacred. But just so you know, the child you erased will grow up knowing exactly who he is and who he's not. She didn't sign it. Left it under a rock at Loren's front door, just like the old days when Daniel would leave her love notes after late shifts. Poetic symmetry. Scorched and folded, emotional reversal. She once lived in apology. Now she moved like a verdict. 1. Final task. She revisited the confession. Cut it down. 30 seconds. Just the damning lines. I needed a way out. Not just for me, but for my son. Then she uploaded it to an anonymous account. Tagged the family law firm. The city records office. Elise's joyblog.cta. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. She watched it go live. Then closed her laptop like a door that would never open again. And in the mirror across the room, Anna saw herself, not as a widow, but as the ghost he thought he buried. Stepping back into her skin, she remembered the first time he cried in front of her. It was after their son's birth, when the doctor handed him the small, red-fisted bundle that wouldn't stop screaming. Daniel had looked terrified, overwhelmed. He kissed her forehead and whispered, I don't know if I'm enough. That had been the most honest thing he ever said. Now he stood on the other side of the courtroom hallway, looking smaller than she remembered, as if the truth had taken a scalpel to his posture. The suit didn't fit him right, shoulders sagged, collar too tight. He looked like a man still pretending to be someone. Anna didn't move. The air between them was thick with echoes of lies, of old vows, of everything unsaid that still shaped them. Behind her, Elise sat hunched on a wooden bench. Hair pulled back, lips pale, one trembling hand pressed to her swollen belly. She hadn't said a word since entering. Grief moved through the building like smoke, slow, creeping. Hard to breathe in until it was too late. Anna turned the envelope in her hand. Inside, documents, financial records, copies of the will Daniel had tried to erase her from. The clerk had stamped them all approved, filed and frozen, every bank account, every asset, gone. He stepped toward her. Anna, she held up a hand. He stopped. Don't call me that. His mouth opened, but nothing came. Narrator aside, some men think silence is peace. But for women, it's where the wound screams. You don't understand what's happening, he finally said. She laughed, quiet, without joy. No, Daniel. You don't understand. You thought disappearing would free you. But it only dug a deeper grave. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. Elise's eyes followed every movement. She looked like she wanted to vanish into the wall. Or back in time. I have nothing left, he said. Please, don't do this. We can't, Anna said. You already did. He blinked, like her voice hurt more than the facts. Some truths don't kill. They flay. I never meant to hurt you, he said. You never meant to get caught, she replied. Narrator aside. But the photo hid something worse. The photo she had leaked to the press, the one of him kissing Elise, one hand on her stomach, dated 3 months before his staged death, was already viral. Beloved husband reappears in financial fraud scandal. The headlines didn't care about her pain, but they made space for her revenge. She handed him the envelope. He opened it slowly, as if afraid of what she'd gathered. Inside, divorce. Papers, full custody forms, a restraining order, and a note, handwritten in her quiet, looping script. Give me my life back. Symbolic object. The ink was still damp. He staggered back a step, mouth open. I'll sign anything, he whispered. You will, she said, but not for me. For him. She nodded toward the hallway, where their son waited with Anna's sister headphones in. Oblivious to the war, unraveling in paper and posture, Daniel followed her gaze. His face crumpled. I miss him, he said, every day. She almost believed it. Antagonist depth. For a moment, the mask slipped, and beneath it was a man who had built a world he couldn't afford to live in. You had a son, she said. Then you chose to become a stranger to him. He looked at Elise. She turned her head. That's what you do, Anna said, softer now. You make people carry your absence like it's their fault. Elise stood slowly, hands trembling. Did you love either of us? She asked, voice barely more than breath. Daniel didn't answer. Elise gave a small, humorless smile. You don't have to lie, not anymore. She walked past him. Anna watched the woman go, no longer a rival, not even a victim. Just another casualty of a man who mistook control for love. Emotional reversal. Anna once believed she'd shatter without him. Now she stood in the ruin he made, and felt whole for the first time in years. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her wedding ring. It still gleamed. Despite everything, she'd kept it. Too long, worn it through storms and silence. Believed in its promise even when the hand beside her pulled away. She held it out. Dropped it at his feet. It hit the tile with a soft metallic click. He didn't pick it up. Now you know what it's like to lose everything. The first orchid she ever saw was in her grandmother's window, pressed between cracked white shutters and sunlight. A violet bloom, somehow alive in winter. Anna was 6. She touched the glass like it was magic. Her grandmother whispered, some things grow where they're not supposed to. She hadn't thought of that flower in years. Now, standing in a borrowed kitchen in a city that didn't know her name, Anna held a plastic pot. In both hands, it was small. Ceramic, chipped near the base. The orchid inside had just begun to bloom again, 2 tender petals curling open like a secret forgiving itself. She placed it on the windows behind her. The kettle clicked off. The silence afterward was too quiet for comfort, but too familiar. To fight. Her son's backpack leaned near the door, zipped, scuffed. A drawing stuck out of the top, scribbled figures of trees and blue skies. He'd given them names this time, not real ones. Just placeholders, safe ones. It was the first picture he'd drawn in months where no one was missing. Anna poured tea and didn't touch it. Outside, traffic murmured. She let the sound fill the parts of her brain that used to run defense. No alarms now. No shadows in the driveway. No mailbox full of legal documents that twisted her name into someone else's. She was alone. And for the first time, that didn't feel like failure. Therapy helped. Or maybe it just gave her permission to speak aloud what she'd only dared whisper in her sleep. I keep seeing his face in places he's never been, she'd said once. Like trauma is trying to build a map out of false sightings. Her therapist had nodded, quietly, kindly. And what do you do when you see him? She asked. Anna had stared out the office window. The orchids there were fake. I look away, she'd said. But I keep listening for the apology that never. Comey's, that was weeks ago. Today, she sat at her kitchen table with a new journal, leather-bound, no initials. She wrote, "Closure is a myth, but so is permanence." Narrator aside, sometimes healing doesn't arrive. It just stops needing permission. She lit a small candle beside her mug. took the locket from the drawer. Her mother had sent it long ago, tiny silver clasp, inside a picture of her grandmother as a young woman. The back was scratched, but the initials still showed. Man E. H. Margaret Elaine Hart, she whispered. You knew the weight of leaving. Symbolic object. She placed it beside the orchid. There were moments she still flinched at unexpected footsteps. Certain colognes in the supermarket, the sound of her phone ringing at night. But the wounds had edges now. They bled less. She opened her laptop and pulled up the manuscript. Title, A Map of False Widows. She had written 72 pages. But page 73 was where the truth started screaming. Not about Daniel. About the women before her, her own mother, her grandmother. Women who learned silence before they learned spelling. Who translated abuse into decorum. Who smiled through bruises dressed as blessings. Anna had found letters in a box. Her grandmother left unmailed notes to a husband who drank too loud and came home too late. One had read, I kept the orchid alive so I wouldn't lose myself. Now, Anna understood. Survival isn't always loud. Sometimes it just takes root and waits for spring. She closed the manuscript. The house creaked. Not in fear. Just age. Her son ran in from school, shoes thudding against the hallway tile. He waved a permission slip, grinning. Field trip, he said. They're taking us to the botanical gardens. Anna smiled. It landed in her eyes. Orchids? She asked. Dozens, he said. She signed the paper without reading it. Trusted something for once. After dinner, she took out the ashes, a small tin. From the burned journal pages she couldn't bear to keep. Pages with his handwriting. His lies. His fake last wishes. She walked into the yard. Dug a small hole beneath the tree. Poured the ashes in like soil. Planted the bulb. Orchids don't usually grow in dirt, but her grandmother once said, some things bloom anyway. Especially when they're not supposed to. She didn't cry, didn't speak. Just pressed the dirt flat with her palm. Narrator aside, you don't always bury what's dead. Sometimes you bury what almost killed you. Back inside. She picked up the locket once more, ran her thumb across the scratch. Margaret Elaine Hart, the woman who left. The woman who stayed sane. Anna slipped the locket around her neck. It didn't feel like memory. It felt like inheritance, emotional reversal. She had chased closure like it was justice. But what she really needed was space. To live, to name things without explaining why. She tucked her son into bed. He asked if she'd come on the field trip. She said yes. Tomorrow she'd sit with a notebook and write about orchids. And ash, and the silence between them. She waited for closure. She found herself instead. The first letter she ever wrote him was tucked into his suitcase the night before their wedding. It was written on hotel stationery, folded 3 times, sealed with lip balm, because she'd forgotten to pack envelopes. She never asked if he read it. She only knew he never mentioned it. Now years later, Anna sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by silence and loose sheets of paper. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, not for warmth, but for ritual. Her son was asleep upstairs, one hand curled around a flashlight he never turned off. Shadows danced across the walls like the past trying to make itself visible. She picked up the first page. Dear Daniel, she whispered. The pen hovered, as if it knew what came next would not be forgiven. You said love was a place we built. Then you packed your bags and left the walls standing. The words came slow, like a wound remembering how to bleed. You taught me to read silence like scripture, how to measure love by absence, how to hold my breath when your voice darkened. Narrator. Aside, some letters aren't written to be sent. They're written to stop the rot. She paused, folded the page, picked up a second. Elise, she wrote. No, dear. Nothing tender. I don't hate you. But I hate how much of me I lost while trying to become someone he'd choose over you. Her fingers trembled as she underlined the word choose. Twice. You wore my grief like it was your veil. but the altar was always mine. She stopped. Some betrayal doesn't come with daggers. Just dresses your name in someone else's mouth. A log shifted in the fire. Sparks leapt and vanished as she reached for another page. To Lorraine, she began. Her hand hesitated, then moved again. I know why you helped him. I've seen the kind of daughter silence makes, symbolic object. She opened the drawer beside her and pulled out the lipstick-stained coffee mug. Lorraine once left behind the last visit before Daniel's accident. She had washed it twice. The stain remained. I know what guilt you buried. And the boy you tried to raise into a man without teaching him how not to lie. She looked at the handwriting. It was neat. Too neat. Like trying to hold something fragile without shattering it. Narrator. Aside, but the photo hid something worse, not the photo of Daniel with Elise. That had already ignited the storm. This photo was quieter. Her son's drawing, once buried beneath. Math worksheets and spelling tests, 3 stick figures, mom, dad, him, but the new drawing on the fridge had only 2. She reached for it now. Carefully pulled it down. A house. A tree. Her. Him. Smiling dot, and in the sky, a single star, drawn in red crayon. Her son had said it was just a light. She didn't ask more. Some goodbyes don't end with doors closing. Just stars refusing. To dim, she looked back at the stack of letters. 5 in total. 1 for Daniel. 1 for Elise Lorraine, Mark the liar who said nothing while everything was being rewritten. And 1 for herself. That one was hardest. Dear Anna, she had begun. You were not naive, you were hopeful. There's a difference. You didn't fail. You were failed. You didn't lose him. He gave you away. She sat with that for a long time. Reading and rereading. Letting the shame crawl out of her bones like a slow fog lifting. The logs in the fireplace had burned low. Just embers now. She stood. One by one, she fed the letters to the flame, Daniel's first. The words curling inward as if trying to stay. Then Elise's. The ink turned black before it, vanished. Then Loren's. Then Mark's last, the letter to herself. She held it longest, folded. Unfolded, let the edges burn first. Watched it fall like a leaf. Emotional reversal. She had once written to be heard. Tonight she wrote to be freed. She knelt before the fireplace, brushing ash into a jar, an old jam jar, label peeled off. She didn't know why she kept the ashes. Maybe some endings deserved to be held before being let go. Her phone buzzed once. An email alert. She didn't check it. She already knew what it would say. The court's final ruling had come through. Her name was hers again. The estate frozen. Daniel indicted. Elise under investigation. Lorraine silent. CDA line. If justice still matters, you'll want the next page. But Anna didn't need another page. She needed sleep. She placed the ash jar on the mantel. Next to it, her son's drawing. 2 figures. 1 tree, 1 red star. She traced the crayon lines with her fingertip. Then quietly she said, "This time, the family is enough." And in the firelight, the ashes didn't mourn, they glowed. The ring had been too big the first time she wore it. Slid over her knuckle like a question. Daniel had smiled and said, "We'll grow into it." She'd believed him, believed in time, in vows, in the weight of permanence dressed in gold. That night, she slept with her fist curled around it, as if squeezing hard enough could make it fit. Now it arrived in a plain, padded envelope. No note, no return address. Just her name written in handwriting she almost didn't recognize, because time wears memory down until it sounds like someone else's voice. She didn't open it, just stood in the kitchen, tea going cold beside her, and let the package sit like a sealed ghost on the counter. The kettle had boiled 20 minutes ago. Still warm, but not fresh. She poured it down the sink. Watched the steam rise and vanish like the apology he never sent. Her son was at school. The house was quiet, too quiet. Grief quiet. Not absence dash after dot. She turned the envelope over. Once. Twice. Narrator aside. Some returns aren't gestures. They're confessions that didn't ask permission. The last time she saw the ring, it was in a pawn shop display, tucked between a cracked Rolex and a chipped pearl bracelet. No price tag. Just loss, dressed in velvet. She didn't buy it back. Didn't need to. That was years ago, and Anna had already rewritten herself. Mornings were hers now. So were keys, taxes, passwords, peace. She no longer measured days by his moods or her fear. Her skin didn't flinch when doors closed too fast. Still there it was. Returned like a memory refusing to stay buried. She put it in the drawer beneath the sink. The one filled with old warranties, bent takeout menus, and 2 sets of mismatched scissors. Nothing sacred. Nothing dangerous. She didn't mention it when her son came home, but she watched his face as he pulled out his math homework and thought, "You'll never have to unlearn love the way I did." Years passed. The envelope yellowed. Got buried beneath utility bills and forgotten recipes. It only resurfaced when she moved. The house was smaller now. Sunlight hit differently, less like forgiveness, more like fact. Her son, taller than her now, packed his own boxes with the ease of someone not clinging to what had already left. Anna found the envelope, wedged between a drawer and the back of the cabinet. She pulled it out, held it, still sealed. Still anonymous, symbolic object. She opened it with a steak knife. The edge caught on the flap, tore through the years. Inside, the ring, same glint. Same slight warp along the band from where she'd dropped it once, years ago, on a tile floor mid-argument. No note. She rolled it in her palm. It felt smaller now. Or maybe her hand had grown. Her son called from the hallway, asking which box the plates were in. She answered without looking up. Later, as she packed away the drawer, she left the ring in the same envelope and slid it into a keepsake box. Not for her. But not for the trash either. Narrator aside. Some stories don't end. They just wait. For someone else to carry the next line. It would stay there. For nearly a decade, until the night he found it. He was 23. A woman's name tucked into the curve of his throat when he said it. Anna had heard that name before, twice on the phone, once under his breath. Like a prayer. He held the envelope out. "Mom," he asked, "can I give this to her?" She turned. He hadn't opened it. He didn't need to. Maybe he knew. Maybe. The past is a scent you can't shake off, even when you're born after it. She didn't answer at first. Just looked at the ring. It shimmered like something that had once meant forever. She reached for it. Turned it in her fingers. Then held it out. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded. "She's not like..." He trailed off. Anna smiled, slow, not bitter, not sad. Just a woman who had walked through fire barefoot and built a garden in the ashes. "I know," she said. He took the ring, held it like it had weight again, then softly, "Did you love him?" "My father?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then, "I loved the version of him who gave me you." Emotional reversal. Love had once meant losing herself. Now it meant letting go. He looked down at the ring. "I want to promise her it means something." Anna stepped forward. "Then don't give it to her because it's gold," she said. "Give it to her because you never want to leave her with silence." He blinked. Eyes shining, but steady. "I won't," he said. Anna touched his shoulder. "Promise her you'll never take it off." And as he walked away, the ring glinting in his palm, it caught the light like it was finally home. The ring sat in the center of the velvet box, quiet as breath. The same box Anna had nearly thrown away a decade ago, until her son had asked her why it mattered. He was 13 then, too young to carry someone else's betrayal, but old enough to notice how she flinched at weddings. Now he was 23. Standing in the kitchen barefoot, holding that box like it contained something more than metal. His thumb traced the velvet edge. The stove clicked behind him. Soup she'd started, but forgotten to stir. "You sure?" Anna asked. He nodded. I want her to know that love can outlive what made it. Her hand trembled as she reached for his cheek. He was taller now, voice shaped like his father's, but steady in a way Daniel never was. He looked nothing like the man who left, and everything like the man who stayed. Then give it to her, she said, but only if you mean it. Only if. It's yours now, he smiled. The box clicked shut. Narrator aside. Some inheritances aren't objects. They're choices reclaimed. He left after dinner. Said he wanted to ask before sunrise. That beginning should be met in first light. She watched him walk to the car, the ring tucked in his coat pocket like a heartbeat. The porch light buzzed, just once like the house exhaled. Anna didn't cry, but something in her did loosen. A fist unclenched. She went upstairs and opened the old cedar chest. It still smelled like her grandmother's hands, lavender and wood polish. Inside, a stack of letters, photos yellowing at the edges, and her first published book. The cover was faded, the spine cracked. A map of false widows, in gold script. She held it. Flipped to the dedication. To the ones who loved in silence and survived louder. She didn't know who borrowed the book, only that it had found its way into the small college library near where Elise had moved after the trial. Anna hadn't followed her, hadn't needed to. Some ghosts exiled themselves, but stories have roots. Narrator aside, some wounds don't scar. They flower. That morning, a girl with ash blonde hair and chipped nail polish sat in the quietest aisle of the library. She wasn't supposed to be there, was skipping class. Said she needed a break from formulas, from people expecting her to have answers. She pulled the book down because the title sounded wrong in a beautiful way. She didn't know who Anna was, not really, but she read the first line and something inside her cracked. My husband died twice. The first time in the newspapers, the second time in me. The girl's name was Lena. Her mother never talked about the past. Only that she made mistakes. Only that she loved once and it almost ruined her. Lena turned the pages like they were blueprints to a house she'd already walked through. At home, she'd once found an old USB labeled Plan B. Her mother had snatched it from her hands before she could open it. Had gone pale. Said it was nothing. Lena hadn't believed her. But she'd never asked again. Now in the library light, she read until her throat ached. She didn't cry. Not yet. But when she got home, she sat across from her mother and said, softly, tell me the truth. Elise looked up from her tea. Her face hadn't aged much, but her eyes had gone softer. More tired. As if time itself had taught her how to live without armor. She reached for her daughter's hand. I should have burned that drive, she whispered. But I wanted to remember who I almost became. Lena didn't let go. In another city, Anna lit a candle and stared at the wedding ring still on her pinky finger. She wore it like a warning now, not a promise. A symbol, not a wound. Emotional reversal. The ring that once meant belonging now meant survival. Outside, the porch light flickered again. Anna went to the window. A message from her son lit up her phone. She said yes. She smiled. Not the kind that splits the face, the kind that hums under the ribs. She texted back, then tell her she's holding history. And far away, in a library thick with silence, Lena turned the final page and whispered, Mom?